Good morning. I hereby call this the third meeting of the House Standing Committee on Families and Children to order. As a reminder, please silence your cell phone. DJ, please call the roll.
Representative Bojanowski. Here. Representative Callaway. Representative Kleins. Here. Representative Dietz.
Here.
Representative Doan. Representative Duval.
Here.
Representative Elliott. Representative Holloway.
Here.
Representative Mosier. Representative Pollock.
Here.
Representative Rayburn.
Here.
Representative Riley. Here. Representative Rorks.
Here.
Representative Stalker.
Present.
Vice Chair Wilson.
Here.
Chair Heverin.
Here. We're going to go a little bit out of order on the agenda this morning. Senator Storm is currently chairing Judiciary at the same time, so I'm going to ask him to come on up to the testimony table.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Committee.
You're welcome. Please introduce yourself for the table. For the guests, please make sure your green light is on so that we can hear you, and make sure your microphone is close enough to your face. Please proceed, Senator Storm.
Thank you, Senator Brandon Storm, 21st District.
Marcus Vanover, Family Court Judge for Pulaski, Lincoln, and Rockcastle counties.
Crystal Adams. I'm the lead for the Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities Work Group for the Kentucky Judicial Commission on Mental Health.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. We're excited to present to you today Senate Bill 26, which was, again, the brainchild of the Kentucky Judicial Commission on Mental Health and their Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities Working Group. This legislation is as a result of two cases, one from the Supreme Court of Kentucky and one from the Court of Appeals of Kentucky. Those cases are Cabinet for Health and Family Services versus KS 585, Southwest 3rd 202, a Kentucky Supreme Court case from 2019, and TC versus Cabinet for Health and Family Services, case number 22 CA 0219ME, which is a Kentucky Court of Appeals case from 2021. And what this basically does is it ensures that Kentucky is compliant with the ADA and verifies that disability alone cannot be used as a basis for terminating adoption petitions, terminating parental rights, or involving placement of children. At this time, I'd like to defer to my colleague.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee, for allowing us to present on this today. As I said, I'm Marcus Vanover, Family Court Judge in Lincoln, Pulaski, and Rockcastle counties, but I also serve as the lead for the Dependency, Neglect, and Abuse Work Group for the Kentucky Judicial Commission on Mental Health. Also with us today is Crystal Adams, the Director for the Division of Developmental and Intellectual Disabilities with the Department of Behavioral Health at the Cabinet for Health and Family Services, who also serves as the lead for the Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities Work Group for the Kentucky Judicial Commission on Mental Health. I thank you on behalf of the Commission for this opportunity to present our 2025 legislative recommendation. The Commission was established by Supreme Court order in 2022. It casts a wide net in representing agencies and court partners in Kentucky with more than 80 appointed members. This includes legislators from both chambers, including Representative Mosier, who is also on this committee. But the reach is even larger. We have over 400 professionals serving across the Commission's 10 work groups, and each year we collect legislative recommendations for things that we've identified through our work to try to improve services for folks with mental health and related conditions. These recommendations go through a vigorous review process as we uphold that legislative change should be our last resort. The entire Commission must review and agree to the recommendation each year, and this year, with Senator Storm's help, we've identified Senate Bill 26. This bill comes from the Intellectual and Developmental Work Group and was vetted through my work group at the Dependency, Neglect, and Abuse to ensure that there was consensus. Next slide. The need for this type of bill was first brought to our attention after 585 Southwest 3rd 202 in the case of Cabinet versus Health and Family Services versus KS. This case was before the Kentucky Supreme Court and highlighted that a mother with cognitive issues and mild autism had lost her parental rights. She actually had reached out for help while the child was in the hospital, and through a series of problems was not able to reunify with her child In the opinion, the justices all were very concerned about the way that her intellectual disability was handled through the case and services she was offered. However, under the law, the judge had not erred in making that determination because of the way that the statutes at the time were worded. Additionally, a similar case in TC versus Cabinet, in an unpublished opinion in 2022, the Court of Appeals then noted that the mother involved in that case showed that clear evidence that her disability did not diminish her love for her child, nor did it hinder her cooperation with the Cabinet or prevent her from completing her case plan. However, again, under the law, termination was upheld because there wasn't the statutory protection for the disability. She was denied an opportunity to demonstrate improvement, not because of neglectful or harmful behavior, but primarily stemmed from her diagnosis. These cases underscore the need for change in Kentucky and to ensure that individuals with disabilities are not being wrongfully discriminated against on the sole basis of their disability. Now I'd like to invite Ms. Adams to share with you some research supporting the need for this bill.
Again, my name is Crystal Adams, and I thank you for the opportunity to present Senate Bill 26 for your consideration. The Health and Human Service Office for Civil Rights and the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division published technical assistance in 2020 for state and local child welfare agencies and courts related to the implementation of the Americans with Disabilities Act, citing reports of discrimination from individuals with disabilities involved in the welfare system across the country. They cited the National Council on Disabilities data from their 2012 Rocking the Cradle report to demonstrate the long-standing and widespread nature of the problem. This report indicated that national removal rates where parents have a psychiatric disability were as high as 70 to 80%. National removal rates where parents have an intellectual disability were as high as 40 to 80%. And 13% of families with a parent's physical disability reported discriminatory treatment in custody cases.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any questions? All right, seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Representative Bojanowski. Representative Cal.
Very strong yes. I'm sorry. It took me a minute to push the button. Very strong yes.
Representative Callaway. Representative Kleins.
Yes.
Representative Dietz.
Yes.
Representative Doan.
Aye.
Representative Duval.
Yes.
Representative Elliott. Representative Holloway.
Yes.
Representative Mosier.
Yes.
Representative Pollock.
Yes.
Representative Rayburn.
Yes.
Representative Riley. Yes. Representative Rourks.
Yes.
Representative Stalker.
Yes.
Representative Wilson.
Yes.
Chair Heverin.
Yes. The bill passes 15-0 with favorable expression and should do so on the House floor. Thank you very much, Senator Storm and your guests.
Thank you all for your time.
Next, we will hear Senate Bill 85. Senator Meredith, can you please make your way to the testimony table with your guests? Please introduce yourself for the record and have your guests introduce themselves as well. Make sure your green light's on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm State Senator Steve Meredith from the 5th District.
Madam Chair, I am Allison Ball, the State Auditor.
Madam Chair, Lauren Ferguson, Chief of Staff for the State Auditor.
Please proceed.
Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity to present Senate Bill 85 before your committee today for consideration. This bill is a continuation of the work for the Cabinet for Health and Family Services or Reorganization Task Force, which occurred during the 2022 interim session. I co-chaired this task force along with House Speaker Pro Tem David Meade, with the mission to examine numerous functions within the Cabinet of Health and Family Services in hope we could identify ways to make it more efficient, more responsive to the needs of our constituents. The work of the task force resulted in 14 recommendations to realign several functions within the Cabinet, which culminated in the filing and eventual passing of Senate Bill 48 during the 2023 session. I think one of the most impactful recommendations that we saw from this bill was to reassign the function and responsibility of the Office of Ombudsman from the Cabinet to the State Auditor's Office to give it more independence, to give it more transparency, and to be more responsive to the needs of our citizens. Within Senate Bill 48, we gave it a 2-year transition period because we knew it would take a while to make this transition. And many hours have been spent in the Auditor's Office and the Cabinet for Health and Family Services to accomplish this, but we're not there yet. And there's some administrative things we need to take care of to make the transition total. And with that, I'll defer to Auditor Ball to explain what actions need to be taken to complete this work.
So I'm sure many of you will remember this bill, and it looks very similar to what you passed 2 years ago. But when we transitioned the Office of the Ombudsman under the umbrella of the Auditor's Office last July, we ran into a roadblock, and that roadblock was really significant, and it was access to the iTwist database. That database contains all information involving child abuse, elder abuse, absolutely essential, necessary information to be able to do the work of the Ombudsman. The Ombudsman acts very much as an auditor. The public contacts the Ombudsman. Ombudsman looks into complaints and issues and investigates and makes recommendations to the Cabinet for Health and Family Services to make changes if necessary. So obviously, that database, you have to have that. You have to be able to look and see what people are complaining about in order to be able to make recommendations and investigate. We went back and forth over the summer with the Cabinet to try and reach some kind of resolution. We were never able to reach a resolution. We ultimately brought a lawsuit in Franklin Circuit, and then Judge Shepard ordered mediation and made it very clear. Everyone at the table recognized that we had to have access to the database, and the judge made it clear, find a resolution to this right now, or the judge would do it himself. So we did reach a resolution temporarily with the understanding that we would come back before you to make sure the language is abundantly 100%, no way around it, clear that we have access to that database. This is cleaning up that problem. There also have been some other roadblocks that have developed with the Cabinet over the course of time. Some of them is we're supposed to receive complaints, and previously when the Ombudsman was under the Cabinet, all the complaints went directly to the Ombudsman. Right now the Cabinet is the go-between for those complaints, and we've noticed statistically that the complaints have dropped off significantly since it used to be at the Cabinet and now is with us. We did an open records request, and we determined that there were several complaints that weren't making their way to us. So this will make sure everything is directed to us. Those things sometimes happen when there's a go-between. This will ensure complaints get to us, we have them, we can act on them, we can investigate, do what we need to do. I say we, I mean the Ombudsman's office. Additionally, this also would require the Cabinet to make the website available. Previously, that information was available, and the Cabinet has sort of redirected things to remain at the Cabinet. So this will ensure, once again, just all information that the Ombudsman needs. The Ombudsman is getting access to that, so that way the Ombudsman can act on it, investigate, and make recommendations as necessary. Those are big ticket items that have to be done in order to be able to do the work of the Ombudsman. There are a few other things that I'll just run through because, of course, whenever you make a transition, you figure out what are all the pieces that got left out last time. These are all the pieces. One of them is protection for whistleblowers, and we have since learned that is necessary. Many times in the auditor's office and in the Ombud, people will say, hey, I have an issue, I know it's going on, but I don't want anyone to know that it came from me. Sometimes it comes from somebody who works at a cabinet and they're worried about protecting their job. Sometimes it's somebody who's close to another individual. There are a variety of reasons why somebody wants their identity to be protected. Alaska has language like this, and we looked at that as a model. So this protects whistleblowers, while at the same time allowing for information that is important to be revealed, within safeguards. So it protects the identities and identifying information, but anything that needs to be known in order to be able to take corrective action. So it's a blend of both transparency, but also protecting individuals. And we've since learned that's necessary. We've actually received open records requests asking for people's identity. So we know that this is a direct and real issue. Another thing is that this would increase efficiencies with the Ombuds office working with the APA by making it an office within the APA. The Ombud acts essentially as an auditor, so it makes the most sense to make it an office within the APA rather than a separate office. That original administrative attachment was to protect the auditor's office originally, because we didn't quite, this was before I was there, this is my predecessor, they didn't quite know how it would work having a whole new division brought into the office, so they requested it to be administratively attached. Auditors by nature are very cautious, very, very cautious. I know, I've worked with them for a year now. And that's a great strength, but it also means they like to figure out how something's going to work first. In the last 6 months, we have seen that there's no reason for there to be a separation. The work is essentially the same, and it would just create efficiencies if they're an office.
We have a motion and a second. Are you all okay not to proceed? Okay. Representative Bojanowski.
Yeah. So before 2023, was the Ombudsman's office underneath the cabinet? So
Yes.
effectively, they were checking themselves on what was happening.
That is correct. And my understanding, and Senator Merritt can weigh in that more because he was a part of the task force, but my understanding is that was one of the big issues that was identified in the task force, that it wasn't a good system for accountability. Obviously, if you work for somebody, there are different incentives to how you investigate and the way that you make recommendations. So that was why it was determined that it would be better to have it be at a separate office. Actually, even more, not under the governor's office, but under another constitutional officer, to make sure that there was the ability to investigate and make recommendations without any other incentives or pressures.
May I ask one more question?
You may. Thank you.
And this specific Ombudsman's office, so it doesn't become the same thing. This doesn't involve anyone who has any concerns or complaints about the auditor's office. Is that correct?
No, and it never did. It's all about the Cabinet for Health and Family
I
Services.
mean, I was just wanting to make sure that we didn't change it from one thing to another thing that effectively.
No,
was
that's
the
a good
same.
question. So this does not work as accountability to the auditor's office, only to the Cabinet for the Health CHFS.
Thank you.
Any other question? Okay, Representative Starker.
I'm going to try. Thanks so much. So I'm a former foster parent. So I'm tracking a lot of what you're saying, but this is also a pretty massive bill. So I want to just kind of slow things down a little bit to make sure that I'm connecting the dots. So Rep. Bojanowski already kind of identified one of the questions as far as I feel like it was problematic to have the Ombudsman's office within the cabinet prior. I talked to other foster parents who've had issues, and it just seems like when you're asking people to check themselves, it's clearly a conflict of interest. So what I'm trying to understand is in 23, when we moved it outside of CHFS, where was it residing? It was with you all.
Yes, so it was under the auditor's office. The auditor is the appointee of the ombudsman, and it was administratively attached, which means that the office provided legal assistance, HR assistance, but it was for the auditors. Like as I said, auditors are very cautious and sort of slow to make changes by nature, just because they try to make sure they're like they are accountants, so they're very slow in doing that. So there was an administrative attachment, which means it was under the umbrella of the auditor's office, but it wasn't an office within the APA. So it has its own floor, and really that's about it. There aren't a lot of differences when it's administratively attached. There are some, because the APA is the support for the ombudsman, but they have their own area. Moving this under the office, they still will be a separate office. We have 3 offices right now within the auditor's office. So it would be a separate office with its own distinct role, its own organizational structure. However, this would allow for just more efficiencies. It also will allow the ombudsman, it will make it mirror in a lot of ways the APA. So for example, for right now, the APA has to provide in writing information when it's doing an investigation, and it allows the person who's being investigated, in this case it would be the secretary, to respond. You've got 15 days to respond, and there's a back and forth process. It works very well in the auditor's office. This would have that mirror the APA. I actually think that will lead to more clarity and more likelihood that they will accept recommendations and move on recommendations.
Chair, may I ask a follow-up question, please?
Yes.
Can you help me understand, so once it was moved over to you all, but not officially, but just kind of within your building on kind of doing its own thing, you had mentioned the iTwist system. So you had no access to that? Can you talk about what what was that process like when you were trying to request information, because you were still needing to get that directly from the cabinet because you didn't have direct access to that, correct?
Yes. So this is something that we could talk about all day because it was quite a process and it was a big issue for the APA for a while. So we had many meetings. Most of them were good, resulting in easy transition for most things. However, the I-twist part was the hang up. And
for the benefit of everybody in here, can you explain what I-twist is?
Yes. So it contains all of the information related to foster care, child abuse allegations, investigations, as well as elder abuse or an adult abuse, not just elder. If you're a person with disabilities, this would also qualify. So the ombudsman receives information from a variety of sources, usually the public, and has to be able to look at records in order to be able to investigate and then make recommendations. These are all the records. Now, the last bill, the one that was voted on 2 years ago, it said records. It didn't say I-twist specifically. It said records. We felt like the law was clear that while it is in a digital format, it is still a record. So and it was very clear, everybody was in agreement, even the cabinet, that we had to have access to that information in order to be able to do the job. We were really hopeful that this was one of those things we could just reach an agreement and not revisit legislation and not have to take any other actions. We never could reach an agreement. We tried very hard, back and forth, email documentations. We actually met with the senator and then Representative Meade to try and get clarity. What did you mean when you said this about records? We just never reached it. So we actually sued in order to be able to get access to that database. It was in front of Franklin Circuit, in front of Judge Shepard. Judge Shepard ordered mediation. I believe it was 3 weeks. It wasn't very long at all. We, through mediation, which is just, some outside pressure, we were able to reach a resolution that gave us access to the database, but also with the understanding that we would come back to this body and request language that made it 100% abundantly clear, no way around it, there's access to the database.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Representative Klons?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I remember the meeting 2 years ago, and I just want to thank you and your team for your persistence, and I look forward to your working within the I-twist system. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We've got one last question. Representative Rourke.
Just wanted to make a brief comment on the bill. I think my concern with the bill is that before it was moved under the APA, that was an independent office, but the auditor office, has a different leaning, and I think that's where my concern with the bill comes into, going from an independent office to maybe not as it's under your direct supervision.
So if I may, the independence problem was when it was under the Cabinet for Health and Family Services, and it was the issue that was identified a little bit earlier, where it was someone who worked for the cabinet for the secretary for the cabinet. So, hired by the cabinet secretary. That person was then, the ombudsman was supposed to then investigate and make recommendations. That was the independence problem. That was the problem that was identified in the task force. That's why it was moved over to the auditor's office, which it was 2 years ago. Administratively attached. It was administratively attached for the auditors because the auditors were worried that maybe this would impact the work that they were doing. We have since seen there's no reason for concern. Again, it's very common among the auditing world to slow walk, figure out how does this work. We've done it for 6 months. The independence issue was never about the auditor's office. It was always about the Cabinet for Health and Family Services. That was the independence problem, which was resolved, and it has been resolved. That was resolved 2 years ago. It's resolved now. This would just allow for greater efficiency within the office. It also, I think, provides greater clarity. They work as an auditor. They do. And this just actually makes them follow some of the auditing rules that we already do, which is more likely to result in somebody accepting recommendations. It's just got a process. You have to notify people. They can respond in writing. Then you can respond back to what they've said. It's a clear, documented back and forth. All those rules in the auditing office exist to give everybody a fair shot to respond and then be able to make recommendations. And that would increase that in this office. It actually makes everything stronger, better, more independent. And as an example, we actually have already released, the Ombudsman has already released one report, which I believe is very significant. And it was the report 3 or 4 weeks ago revealing that there were still foster children sleeping in office buildings. It was a 4-month review, found 49 children that had been placed in office buildings to sleep. Youngest children were 1, 2, and 3. Average age was 13. Average period of time was 4 nights. This is the kind of information that had not come out at all while it was under the Cabinet for Health and Family Services. It's just one of those great examples of why you truly do want independence. You do. You want independence so that way somebody feels comfortable making this kind of information, which is necessary for you and the public to be able to make the policy decisions that you need to make.
Thank you. I'm going to let Representative Stalker ask one more question. Oh, actually, Representative Dietz, and then I'll let you finish it up, Representative Stalker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I spoke with your team yesterday, and to echo what you said with an example, I had a constituent reach out to me about his daughter, who was a young social worker in Kenton County, and had found out that they were transporting children in their private vehicles, and they needed to get different type of insurance to protect them. So I reached out to the cabinet. I've been waiting a year for an answer. The response I got is, well, we'll see if we can get more vehicles in Kenton County. And every time I run into this person, I ask, where are we on this? I have no answer. But I think it's an issue for the state on liability. I mean, we've got, and we're probably talking about a young social worker just out of school. But, what kind of insurance are they supposed to have? And are we opening the state up for an issue? But I've waited a year for an answer. So just another example on accountability and somebody neutral to get me an answer for the cabinet. So thank you.
Well, the Ombudsman is here, and we will treat that as a tip. And that's precisely the kind of thing that the Ombudsman is here for.
Thank you. Representative Stalker.
Thank you, Chair. Can you briefly explain what differences were in the negotiated settlement and what the cabinet initially proposed months before?
Oh, well, the proposals weren't very much as far as, they went back and forth. It would be hard for me to actually trace back all the iterations of it. But for a while, they wanted us to, for one point, it was to us to subpoena records from them in order to be able to see it. There was talk about how the auditor always has the ability to review anything, including iTwist. So perhaps the auditor should make those requests. The subpoena thing was a proposal for a while, and that would create delays. That was a worry for us, is because you have to act quickly. Subpoenas take time. I'm trying to remember all the proposed. There were many iterations.
I will say, I think Representative Stalker, were you here during the interim? Because we did discuss this during the interim. The auditor's office came in. Okay.
It got to be a question of legislative intent as well, and that's why Representative Eden and I met with this group to say, here was our intent. I think you understand it. And this could have been handled through regulation. There was wording within the regulations themselves that said the cabinet could assign those records to other agencies of the state government, but they refused to acknowledge that. So we asked them just to take the step to ask to make that clarification, and never could get them to agree to it.
And if I may, the cabinet has agreed to this particular language on the iTwist. So when we met with them, they were in agreement that this would resolve that issue.
They shared that with me as well, that they were good with the iTwist language. So thank you for that. Okay, we've got a motion and a second on the floor. I'm going to go ahead and ask DJ to please call the roll.
Representative Bojanowski.
Pass.
Representative Callaway. Representative Kleins.
Yes.
Representative Dietz.
Yes.
Representative Doan.
Yes.
Representative Duval.
Yes.
Representative Elliott. Representative Holloway.
Yes.
Representative Mosier.
Yes.
Representative Pollock. Representative Rayburn.
I'd like to explain my vote. This bill is common sense. If we're going to hold accountability to the Cabinet for Health and Family Services, this bill has to happen. I'm a yes. Thank you.
Representative Riley. Yes. Representative Rourks.
Pass.
Representative Stalker.
Briefly explain my vote. I'm unfortunately going to pass today simply just because I want to follow up with you, Auditor Ball, specifically on some things, as well as the cabinet, just some additional questions I have. I am extremely happy to hear, though, that the cabinet was definitely in favor of the iTwist. There are certain things that you have to have access to, and time is always of the essence. So I think there's some very good components to this, but there are some other things that I just don't have enough clarity on to make a confident vote one way or another. So thank you guys so much.
Representative Wilson,
Yes.
Chair Heverin.
Yes. The bill passes with favorable expression and should do so on the House floor. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members of the committee.
All right. Our last bill will be House Bill 805. Representative Wilson, please make your way to the table. You are being passed out a House Committee amendment from the chair. This is just cleaning up a technical change. It is just a repeated phrase. Okay. Please introduce yourself for the record, and then I'm going to talk about the House Committee substitute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Representative Nick Wilson, the 82nd District, representing Whitley and Laurel County.
Representative Sarah Stalker, representing District 34 in Louisville, Kentucky.
Thank you. House Committee Substitute 1 has two parts. I'm going to talk about the first part, and then I will Representative Stalker talk about the second part. The first part establishes a timeline to require the cabinet to physically locate a child that has been reported to be at risk or harm of immediate safety concern. Representative Stalker.
Thank you, Chair. The additional provision that you all are working in today for committee sub is simply just to make sure that our kinship reporting is made available to us on a yearly basis automatically, that it does not need to be requested from anybody from this body, and also that it would be sent, it would be published on a public-facing website by the cabinet as well, so that the general public has access to this all year round.
Motion on the sub.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We do have a committee substitute that has passed. Go ahead and...
Madam Chair, could I entertain a motion for the amendment to the committee sub to take care of that repeat phrase?
Yes.
There.
So we do have a committee sub, document ID 5704. That corrects a repeated phrase in the committee sub. We have a motion and a second. Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. We do have the committee amendment does pass. Representative Mosier, do you have a question or? Oh, okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay. Representative Wilson, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Last year we passed House Bill 271 to provide some definitions and framework to a process that the cabinet was already using. House Bill 805 this year provides some cleanup to what some of the sections of House Bill 271. For example, House Bill 271 defines safety plan. This bill this year clarifies that definition by changing the word threats to risks, because in the court of law and in the cabinet and in social worker, sometimes there are terms of art that really should not be used interchangeably. Through working with the cabinet and just this process playing out in real life, we're discovering which words are maybe more appropriate for different sections of the statute. Another change that was made was at the recommendation of 0V, and it was a great point that there was a section where in House Bill 271 we mentioned a plaintiff and a DVO, where normally, when we're changing that to an alleged victim of domestic violence, because normally a child in a DVO case is not the plaintiff. They're probably just someone's child or a sibling or something of that nature. That's usually the DVO is between two adults, and so we wanted to correct that. And really, the rest was mentioned in the committee sub by you, Madam Chair, and Representative Stalker. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to attempt to answer them.
Representative Down.
I just have just two brief questions, if I may, Chair.
Yes.
Going to page 12 on the bill, we're swapping out the word threats with risks. I mean, it is a big change. I think the cabinet's already operating on a risks-based assumption. Could you go into kind of what's going on there and why that word's being changed? It's on the safety plans.
Yes. So last year we created that definition safety plan to codify a practice that we had been seeing happen in court, whereas a family or a parent may be given a safety plan before, during, or at some point in the process of a investigation. Maybe it doesn't go to court, but a safety plan can cure it. So that definition was created last year, and it feels that it would have been more appropriate to use the word risks last year. So now we're correcting that.
I agree. And then on page 24 at the back, where we're adding the additional language about the negotiated safety plans, real familiar with those, but you're just cleaning up language there, right? I mean, these are negotiated, so the parents here are already saying the child shouldn't be in our home. It's probably not appropriate for them, and that's a voluntary thing they're doing.
Yes, I believe what you said just now is absolutely correct.
Yep, just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Representative Rayburn.
Yes, I've just got one question here. On page 15, we're striking out the word intakes and replacing it with reports. You know, I'm somewhat familiar with how that process works. And I'm under the assumption that you're going to see a significant number increase because of the amount of reports that actually come in versus the amount of intake that they actually do. Could you explain and maybe help me better clarify what that's going to look like when it comes to us in that annual report?
Sure. So the purpose of that is the purpose of that section is just to keep us informed on what it's looking like out there in the real world. And so I think it's important to have that number of reports as opposed to intakes. But that's what will be reported to the LRC and then to us. So I think it just gives a better, fuller picture of the story for us to make policy, pass law, and make changes if needed, or continue to do what's working.
I appreciate the language change there. I think it will be helpful for this committee and for us moving forward on future legislation. So thank you for that.
Representative Down.
Sorry, but I just wanted to jump in on the reports versus intakes things. I mean, an intake is different than a report. I mean, reports can come all the time and come from various different sources. And just because a report's made doesn't mean that that the cabinet gets involved or that the cabinet actually opens up an investigation. So we're just seeing what's a report as opposed to an intake, I would think, would be where the cabinet's coming in and actually starting an investigation. So folks will get letters in the mail saying there was a report, we didn't see that it met the criteria, but we're getting that gross number as opposed to just what was, I would think, just an intake.
Right. And so if you remember last year when we passed House Bill 271, a big part of the problem we were trying to correct was that there was a very low number of investigations. I want to say about 40% of the reports or complaints were actually investigated. And so this is an attempt to just monitor that and see if there is such a low number of investigation, if that's warranted or if not, or if we should try legislatively to have more investigations. A big part of the bill last year was just getting physical eyes on the situation as opposed to folks making decisions by looking at a computer screen. So that's what we attempted to do with the bill last year, and we're hoping to continue to attempt to do that. And this is just a little bit of cleanup to hopefully reach our goal more effectively.
Thank you. And just to add in, both of those suggestions that you mentioned, Representative Doan and Representative Rayburn, they both came from the Children's Alliance. That was cleanup language suggested from them, just to make sure that we're getting accurate reporting from the cabinet. Representative Dietz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to follow up on what Representative Wilson said is, I did a little bit of work last year with you all on this bill, and the concern we heard from our family court judges is we were afraid that with the new reporting system that there were decisions being made that are really judicial decisions. So I think that's what this attempts to do, is to track that. It's not that we want more reports. I think we'd be happy if we didn't have those types of reports, but we want the judges to be able to make those decisions.
That's exactly right. And that's why we define safety plan, because not necessarily what they were doing was wrong. We just want to have it codified. We want to know what is going on and help them when we can. And sometimes that may mean that an investigation should happen when maybe in the past it was accidentally overlooked or just didn't hit the right buzzwords on a computer algorithm or something like that. We just want to prevent. This is just cleaning up what we decided was a good idea last year.
Motion on the bill.
All right, I have a motion, and I heard that motion was a motion on House Bill 805 as amended by House Committee Substitute 1 and House Committee Amendment 1. So we've got a motion and a second on that. DJ, please call the roll.
Representative Bojanowski.
Yes.
Representative Callaway. Representative Kleins.
Yes.
Representative Dietz.
Yes.
Representative Doan.
Yes.
Representative Duval.
Yes.
Representative Elliott. Representative Holloway.
Yes.
Representative Mosier.
Yes.
Representative Pollock.
Aye.
Representative Rayburn.
Yes.
Representative Riley. Representative Rourks.
Yes.
Representative Stalker.
Yes. Yes.
Representative Wilson.
Yes.
Chair Hebron.
Yes. The bill passes with favorable expression and should do so on the House floor. Do I have a motion to roll the committee amendment into the House Committee Substitute 1? We've got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Our next meeting will be next week, Thursday, March 6th at 9 a.m. in room 171.